and welcome to today's episode of Women's Health Unwrapped. Today we're unwrapping a topic that is a big news story right now. Should we say it's a pretty hot topic? And it's one that I feel I have a responsibility to explore and open up for you. It's the topic of weight loss drugs, primarily those injectables, injections you may have heard of, the GLP-1 type, which are commonly known as Ozempic or Mounjaro, which we're going to explore in further detail. And as I was doing some research for this episode, I found this statement on the government website, so gov.uk, which says public interest in the use of GLP-1RA products for weight loss is high. So even the government are acknowledging how much attention is currently around these types of weight loss drugs. To help me explore this topic, I have Helen Perks with me, a health and wellness strategist, registered nutritional therapist, and nutrition and lifestyle medicine practitioner. So welcome to the podcast, Helen.
Hi, thank you for having me. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm really good, thanks. And we were chatting before we started recording, and it was lovely to hear that Helen is also originally from the Northeast and is a frequent visitor back to the area where I live, and we like the same beaches and some of the same restaurants as well. So it was nice to have a little chat about that. But just to get to know you a little bit more, Helen, I'd love to ask, what is your most impactful healthy habit at the moment?
I think going for early morning walks when the frost is on the ground, the sun is shining, and I'm out there with my dog. And do you know what? I hug a tree or two as well, because I find that quite emotional when I do that, because it's a fabulous, great living thing that, gives us so much. And yeah, that's what I enjoy doing. It sets my brain up for the day, sets my body up for the day, and triggers an appetite for a lovely breakfast on my return.
Oh, amazing. And I am a fan of those bright, crisp, frosty mornings as well. Although I must say I'm looking forward to the spring and then summer weather. I think we need a bit of warmth. But when you see that white frost, yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
I totally agree. I mean, when we move into autumn, winter, I'm really craving those casseroles and roast dinners. But I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, yeah, bring on the salads and the sunshine. My endocrine system is craving it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a long autumn winter blended season in the UK, that's for sure. So I think a good place to start with this topic would be to just have you explain what the weight loss injectables and drugs are that we're talking about today, so that we're really clear on what they are and why they've become such a hot topic, especially for many women.
Yeah, so basically you spoke about Ozempic and Mounjaro, and they are medications that originally were developed for type 2 diabetes, but they've really gained traction in terms of their weight loss effects. And it works by mimicking a natural hormone in the body called GLP-1, which stands for glucagon like peptide 1. And basically that peptide plays a role in blood sugar regulation, appetite regulation, and also digestion. So essentially that is what the weight loss drugs are about. I can go on and share how they work. Would you like to do that now?
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, so there's three areas really in which they work. So they help to slow down digestion, and that means that it allows the food in the stomach to stay there for longer. So you feel fuller for longer, so therefore you eat less. They also help to reduce appetite. So they are affecting the brain's hunger signals, as it were. So helps to reduce cravings and overeating, and then lowers blood sugar. So it helps to regulate the amount of insulin that is being produced by the pancreas. So therefore it reduces sugar spikes and sugar crashes. So essentially they are the three things that the weight loss drugs are kind of regulating within the body.
So Ozempic and Mounjaro, they were originally created to help manage type 2 diabetes. And Wegovy, I think, is that the one that was originally developed for obesity? However, all three do kind of the same thing. And yeah, that was just the origin of them. And so when it comes to obesity, I had a few facts that I think really help to put some perspective behind why these drugs have been developed. Now, although right now they have become a hot topic, which we're going to go into and discuss more, they aren't brand new drugs. These drugs have been around for quite some time. As you said, originally developed to help with type 2 diabetes, but then the weight loss kind of came about as a side effect, and then commercially it was realized, that this is an opportunity. But also, one of the types was developed for obesity, because obesity is a growing problem globally. And a few of the stats I had related to the UK, which were from a 2024 UK government report, indicate that between 22 and 23, 64% of adults over the age of 18 in England were estimated to be overweight or living with obesity. And alongside that, when it came to children, it said that around 27% of children between the ages of 2 and 5 were overweight or obese in that same time period of 22 and 23. And I've heard bigger numbers with regard to those stats across adults and children in the US, quite scary numbers when you think about the US. So we know that obesity has increased, and it is a problem that can impact your health in so many ways. So kind of just, from you, Helen, I'd love to know what your thoughts are, because I think there's one thing that the drugs have been, developed for obesity and type 2 diabetes, but then what we're going to look into more is how they're being leaned on, perhaps for other reasons, by women, especially women in midlife. So yeah, do you feel that these drugs have a positive place to help tackle that rising obesity crisis, essentially?
I feel that these weight loss drugs should be only given under strict medical supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many, many reasons for that, and many concerns that I have. So one of the things that concerns me about using these injections outside of medical supervision is malnutrition. And I can dive into that more a bit later if you like. My other concern is I would absolutely hate for any woman to be using these kind of medications when they're pregnant, because I've seen the mice studies, and those mice that have been injected with the weight loss drugs have had very deformed fetuses. And also, I think, for anybody that has an eating disorder and they have, access to medications like this, again, that is not a great thing. And I don't think it is responsible of our governments or society as a whole to enable just anybody to have access to these injections. And I always go by these three words, and I share these three words with my clients and everybody around me. But I feel that in terms of the UK, we always put profit before people, and I think this is a prime example of this playing out. With the weight loss injections. So yeah, there are several concerns that I do have. In terms of malnourishment, we need nutrients. As a society, we have lost we've lost our connection with food and what food provides us in terms of nutrients. So for example, if I was to show you this is a model of a human cell, and cells make tissues form organs, brains, ovaries, wombs, you name it. And inside a human cell, you've got lots of organs, organelles. So for example, you've got the membrane here where your nutrients, your sex hormones dock. And so therefore we need to ensure we are consuming enough essential fatty acids for that to happen. And for the nutrients and the hormones to be able to flow really freely inside of that cell, because we want to be feeding our mitochondria with folate and iron and coenzyme Q10 that gives us energy. We want to ensure we're hydrating so that we're supporting the cytoplasm, which is the fluid of the cell that houses all these organs. And then we've got the lysosome here, which is what I refer to as the bowel of the cell. It helps to poop out the toxins from the cell so that we can excrete them. And, we're we're needing things like vitamins A, C, and E, for example, for the lysosomes to operate. So you can see why it is essential that we consume a nutrient-dense diet. And I feel that the injections without proper coaching will lead some people, to reduce the amount of ultra processed food they're eating, for example. So if you listen or read to the book The Magic Pill, which talks about these weight loss jabs, the guy, the author, is actually taking Ozempic. And he said, all I'm doing is eating half a KFC bucket or halving the amount of McDonald's that I'm consuming. So for me, I think there is a huge risk of malnutrition when we are taking these weight loss injections long term. We could be looking at a crisis in years to come in terms of Alzheimer's, cancer, autoimmune disease, osteoporosis, which is where your bones become softer, especially as we transition through perimenopause and menopause, and really reducing our support to our immune system and so on and so forth. So for me, there is a genuine concern, but not just me. I mean, I spoke to one of my GPs in my GP surgery, and she said to me, what do you think of these drugs? And I said, well, I don't believe that the NHS is going to support people that have been prescribed these drugs in the right way. And she agreed. And she said that she had just seen someone before me and had to treat them for pancreatitis, which is a serious condition. So, I feel that people aren't being given the right message about these weight loss injections and what the long-term effects can be. If people are genetically predisposed to thyroid cancer, for example, from somebody in their family has had it, then they're at even greater risk of developing this type of cancer by using these injections. Pancreatitis, nausea, vomiting. Stephen Fry, he admitted to vomiting 5 times a day when he used the injections. So I think the side effects haven't been discussed properly, and they really do increase risks of developing certain diseases long term. And as that GP said to me, she said, when people stop using them, they're just going to put weight back on. And that's an NHS GP. So and muscle loss as well. So I think there are real kind of risks and concerns around using these injections outside of a medical prescription.
Yeah. And so I think I just kind of want to box off that there is a place for these when it does come to obesity. However, I think we're still sticking a plaster over the problem. We aren't really getting to the root cause of why obesity has increased and is increasing, especially in children. I mean, that's a huge societal and economical related discussion, that goes way beyond my podcast and certainly what we've got time for between you and I. I'm sure we could thrash out a lot of opinion on that and chat about it. But yeah, kind of to box that off, and that, that there is potentially, a lot of people who, without these weight loss drugs, will have, worsening health and have a much shorter health and lifespan, who without these drugs would otherwise essentially die and possibly die in very poor health. So perhaps, there is a place for them there. However, as you said, that is to be managed in the right way with the right medical professional. However, what we wanted to explore more of is, because these drugs exist for those type of people, whether you agree with them or not, this is not Helen, but you listening, whatever our personal opinions of them might be and whatever else we know needs to go alongside them being used and prescribed, there is this attraction to them, hence that statement I read out from the UK government's website of the attention that is on them at the moment, because so many women are obsessed, should we say, with losing weight. A lot of what I do is based around the fact that many women think weight loss is the key to feeling confident, liking themselves, growing their self-worth, being healthy, and only focus on it through the lens of a diet, which comes with restriction and denial and all of those emotions and so on that accompany that. And you do a lot of work with this yourself, obviously working in nutrition with women as well. And so kind of what's your thoughts then on why so many women we're hearing about, and we're not talking about just the normal women on the street, who are intrigued by it, that they're actually getting their hands on it. But, there's so many really intelligent, professional, we've got the celebrities who apparently are taking it. Some have openly spoke about taking it, some are hiding it. But yeah, what's your thoughts on why this is such a hot topic right now?
Well, it's a trend, and I always believe that these trends come from America. And I have a saying: when they sneeze, we catch the cold, and it usually comes from, say, people in the film industry, actors, actresses, pop stars, and so on and so forth, and influencers on social media. And it's almost like sending a message to us women that we have to look a certain way. Of course, men take it as well, but primarily the focus is on women. And we are being told by society, and again by the pharmaceutical companies, that we should look this way. And I think that's where it comes from. But like you quite rightly said, we should be, losing weight. And losing weight rapidly is not a healthy thing to do. Losing too much weight is not a healthy thing to do either. And optimizing health isn't just about weight. It is about so many other things, which is why I created my respect model of health and well-being, because there are 7 different elements when it comes to optimizing health that scientists, doctors, influencers talk about, but separately. But we need to kind of bring them all together, so that we have optimal health, so that we can live the future we have envisaged for ourselves with minimal interruption to our quality of life. And I don't think that using, weight loss injections is the answer.
I agree with you on that. And you and I are completely aligned on taking that 360-degree whole person approach to build the right toolkit of habits for yourself. That's why I always open the podcast asking the guest about their most impactful habit right now, because the diversity is huge, and it's great for women listening to hear what works for someone the most, but then what someone else finds the most beneficial, and realizing that it's piecing together those habits for what you need. And yes, there are those fundamentals that biologically create strong health, like nutrition and movement and managing stress and all of those things that help to balance our hormones, which particularly for women in midlife, navigating perimenopause and menopause, are even more important. And I really just kind of want to come back to what you were saying about the risk of malnutrition, and not just on the malnutrition aspect itself, but where you were coming from with this, Helen, in that by someone taking these injections, it again is kind of plastering over the problem, but it's making them think, well, I've got the answer here, I'm losing weight, but they aren't taking care of those other pillars of the health and well-being. As you said, you've got 7 in your respect model. They aren't necessarily working out. And I remember listening to Johan Hari, whose book you referenced, Magic Pill, who, when he was on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO podcast, and one of the topics they'd started to explore, but I don't think they did justice to at all, and I'm sure I did a social media post on this at the time, was they touched on, well, is this just going to make people think, well, I don't even need to exercise because I just take these injections and I stay thin? And again, it's back to that misbelief people have of, well, healthy just means looking a certain way, not realizing what has to go on inside with all of our cells, as you explained, our tissues, our organs, everything that enables us to optimally function as a human. So yeah, it's just such a big thing that I think sadly many people are either willing to just ignore, or because possibly don't have the right understanding of what healthy living really means, are missing that and potentially putting themselves at a lot of risk.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's lack of education. Mm-hmm. And just to go back to the respect model, so R stands for root cause. So, what is the root cause of you overeating, for example? Is it a certain eating habit? If it is, you could write down what that eating habit is. I want to stop eating junk food. And then you could, and then look at the reasons why you are eating that, or how are you feeding that habit. So it could be, I've got biscuits in my drawer at work. I eat biscuits when I'm having my coffee break at work. I'm eating leftovers from the kids. I'm eating crisps when I'm watching TV. I'm having a glass of wine a night. So if you write down all these actual things that you are doing to feed that habit, you can start addressing that habit. So this is addressing the root causes. So pick the easiest thing that you want to get rid of. Okay, I'm not going to have a glass of wine every night. Take a week to try and break that habit, and then move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So it could take actually 3 months to address one single habit that you would like to overcome. So that's eating habits. And then, of course, sleep hygiene is really, really important, because when we're asleep, it's the only time that the brain actually detoxifies. And, lack of sleep equals inflammation, increased insulin, and therefore it can then result in weight gain. And then, of course, you've got physical movement. And that's not just about losing weight. It is about being mobile, being flexible, so that, we can enjoy a good quality of life as we get older, because there's no reason why we should become stiffer and slow down. And it helps us with balance and so on and so forth. So reduces our risks of falls, bone fractures, and then ending up in hospital. And then we've got our environment. So think about your internal environment. What kind of terrain are you supporting within the body? Because, just reducing the amount of food you're eating doesn't mean to say that you are creating an internal environment that reduces your risk of developing cancer, for example. So, sugar feeds cancer. And then there's your external environment. So what kind of toxic things are happening around you? Are you in a toxic relationship, a toxic work relationship? Are you being bullied at school? Are you burning toxic candles? So all of these impact the body, and stress absolutely impacts, again, insulin levels, and can impact on weight gain. And are you working night shift? Because again, that opens us up to different health risks. And then you've got community. So the internal community of gut microbiota, what are you feeding them? There are different species of gut microbiota, and each one of them is like your fingerprint. It's unique to you. And each one of them supports a different system in the body. So again, what are you feeding your community of gut microbiota? And then your external community. It's so important to us as human beings to belong to groups, to have support networks. Could be because of phases that we're going through in life. So for example, if you're going through perimenopause and menopause, go and find a group of women that are going through the same thing, or whether you've just had a new baby. So all of those are important for our mental health. And then you've got therapeutics, which could include not just supplements, but also whether it's Reiki, meditation, deep breathing. So all of these things together are there to support optimum health. And, reducing what you are eating is really not a good way to support all of those different elements. Because if you're reducing what you're eating, maybe your blood sugar levels drop too low, and therefore it impacts on your sleep impacts on it impacts inflammation, for example. And because I work also in functional lifestyle medicine, and it's not just from our perspective, but what the science tells us is that 99% of illnesses are strongly associated with inflammation. And that includes Alzheimer's, that includes cancers. And 50%, up to 50% of cancers can be prevented through diet and lifestyle. So just reducing what you eat is really not going to be something that optimizes your overall health. So you're quite right to identify that a reduction in consumption of food is not something that is going to help us achieve our overall health objectives. And going back to what you were saying about the statistics, only yesterday it was reported that 50% of the UK's population will be obese by 2050. So we really absolutely need to look at the root causes of what's going on. And this is where personalized medicine comes into play, personalized nutrition. Why have you developed those eating habits? Is it an emotional issue that you need to address through cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, so on and so forth. So what is leading you to eat in a certain way?
And that's a big piece that doesn't seem to be built into the supply and use of these drugs. And I love everything you said there, Helen. And you know, I'm a huge advocate trying to get the message out there of what healthy living really means to help women have that penny drop moment about why health matters so much in terms of contributing to the way they want to feel, that happiness, that fulfillment, joy, success that most of us want from this one life. And then secondly, what it means to be healthy, all of those parts of the toolkit of the puzzle, the stress, the sleep, the nutrition, the movement, the mindset, the community environment, everything, how it all links together, and why it has to be about not just right now the way you look, because I think many women are killing themselves to look the way they think they should look right now. And that sounds extreme, and it is, because that's the reality. We're seeing those hugely increasing numbers in cardiovascular disease for women, dementia for women, osteoporosis, type 2 diabetes, even obesity, where women in many types of cancer as well are far outweighing the ratio of men being diagnosed with them same illnesses and diseases. And we know we work differently because of those hormones we have, but it's that lack of knowledge, as you touched on, and that's a big part of what I think the solution longer term needs to be, as well as definitely there being this, much bigger economic, societal, cultural shift that needs to happen around food and lifestyle, because we are generally becoming a world of lazy people who just want quick fixes. We're addicted to the dopamine hit in whatever form that is, whether it's through food, the screens, phone, TV, entertainment, all of that kind of thing. And it's costing us our health and happiness, essentially. But I don't think we've reached that point for it to be visible enough to make people see what actually is happening because of our lifestyle choices just yet. So I kind of want to shift into something linked to what we're talking about here, with that piece of looking at your behaviour, at your habits, and why you perhaps eat the way you eat, or have other bad habits or just non-existent habits that would support better health, and how easy it is for people to get their hands on these drugs. Now, this is not me personally, but I was listening to a podcast recently. I can't remember, he's a professor at Cambridge University, Giles. You probably know who he is. Giles, he's British. I can't remember his name, sorry. He was talking to two of the presenters of this podcast, and they'd done a few tests of seeing how easy it was to get the injections, and one of them is 9 months pregnant, and she could get the injections literally delivered to her door. Obviously she didn't want them, this was a test. And the other one, all she had to do was take a photograph of the number on the scales and send it through, which she just got a screenshot from TikTok and did that, and then was able to get the drugs. And one of the things that Giles talked about in this podcast was the NICE guidelines, which are essentially the legal parameters governing the prescribing and use of these drugs here in the UK. And the NICE guidelines state that you should have a BMI of 35 or over, or 30 or over, plus a comorbidity, illness or disease, so something else pre-existing like high cholesterol or high blood pressure or diabetes, but still over 30 BMI. Now, I know women personally who have been using these drugs who I would guess have a BMI maybe of around 20, early 20s. They're not even borderline on being overweight. That reality that many women can just go online and basically order them, a bit like an Uber, just Eat type of package, to come to their door, but who don't really need them, and they're then not having the right accompanying guidance and directions and tackling what might be underlying, even if they are someone that is carrying excess weight, and they can get them that easy without someone helping them to understand, one, those side effects, but then two, to create habit change that means when they stop using them, they are actually able to live that healthier lifestyle sustainably. What's your thoughts on all of that? I know I said a lot there.
No, that's fine. Personally, I think we should, and obviously I'm biased here, but my professional body, BANT, the British Association for Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine, has really been lobbying the government to allow or have contracts with registered nutritional therapists. Now, I'm talking about nutritional therapists that've got a basic Bachelor of Science in Nutritional Medicine and higher. I'm not talking about someone who has done a 5-day, 5-month online nutrition course, because what registered nutritional therapists do is help to identify the root causes of whatever health issue that may be presented by an individual. But what nutritional therapists could do is take the weight, pun intended, off the NHS by delivering group programs in each surgery. For example, weight loss might be one, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes. And this way we are sharing clinical pearls with people and educating people along the way. And I feel that if we are educating adults, then they can take that back home and they can lead by example, so their children can learn from them what healthy eating habits are. So I think it does come down to education, and just really highlighting what the side effects, long-term side effects of these use of these drugs can be, and giving people enough information so that they can make an informed decision as to where they want to be in 5 or 10 years time. And I totally agree with you in terms of, when you mentioned the health of women and all the different kind of variables that are currently impacting on their health. For example, if you look at people getting Botox, fillers, fake tans, tattoos, what's going on their nails, what they're putting on their skin, that is cumulative, what they're inhaling, plus their stress levels. And, all of that impacts our body. And I think that we absolutely need group female programs, which I do deliver some online from time to time, to empower women to take back control of their health and to know that it's not just about weight loss. And I think, women being able to access these drugs, and, there you go, a 9-month pregnant woman, which obviously you said, she wasn't going to use it. When I circle back round to what I said at the beginning of our chat, is that, my fear is that some women may use that during pregnancy because they don't want to put on weight when they're pregnant. So I really don't know what the answer is at the moment.
Yeah.
For me personally, I would say, take the injections off the shelves, because even I live in a very small, quintessentially English town called Thaxted, and the pharmacy there sells the weight loss drugs as well, which I was horrified when I first saw the adverts in the window. I just think potentially we are looking at big health issues down the line. And whilst that, we are being told by certain scientists and professors that perhaps are being paid to tell us these things, because that happens as well, that this is going to take the stress off the NHS because of the problem we have with obesity, actually, I think we're going to have a worse situation in the future. And I think there's going to be a lot of stress on the NHS because of the lack of nutrients people are consuming. So I hope that makes sense and answers your question.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And I agree. And this is not only related to people taking these weight loss drugs, but yeah, the pressure on the NHS is already there. And the numbers that we are seeing of increasing levels of illness, disease, immune conditions. For me as a woman and having a daughter who's 17, it does really scare me, because that pressure is going to just grow and grow. We are living really unhealthy lives, and so you're right, we have to educate ourselves better. And one of the area I focus in is obviously menopause, supporting midlife changes that often are linked to those menopause changes as we start to struggle to keep juggling all of the balls and doing all of the things that we've possibly just about been able to manage up until that time of, chaos in perimenopause that comes about. This is where I think we have a prime opportunity to really educate women, because we are thankfully seeing a lot more focus on menopause and a lot of awareness coming out. it still needs to be better in terms of accuracy and so on, but it's growing, which in itself is a good thing. But to help women know what this really means, and that, again, at this time of life, the changes that come about, which for many women does include weight gain or shift in how your body shape is, which I know personally, because I'm experiencing this, can be really difficult to navigate and deal with emotionally. But to know why that's happening and what that means and how to correctly manage this and not just revert to what we've, or many women have done for many, many years, which is the dieting to lose weight, to feel better and like themselves and be accepted. Essentially, there's a lot of judgment, I think, associated with this belief around appearance. So, just talk to me a little bit about this midlife stage where our hormones are shifting and how this, has such a disconnect to using weight loss injections for a solution to feel better and lose that weight in your perimenopause, menopause season.
Well, I mean, first off, I really want to say that we as women need to accept that our body will change as we go through perimenopause and menopause, because we are going through a different life stage. My body has changed and I have accepted that. So I'm not striving to put, a level of hormones in my body that reflects the amount that was in my body when I was 30. My body is not going to look the same. So I think acceptance is key. And what I will say about these weight loss injections and rapid weight loss and a lower calorie intake over a long period of time, that may well impact menstrual cycles, which we don't want to do that when we're trying to navigate our way through perimenopause and menopause as well. And also for women that aren't going through that life stage, it can impact fertility, but also thyroid function. And, if you've got an underactive thyroid, then that can contribute to weight gain as well. And anyone that has any hormone related issues like PCOS can also be worsened. So I think acceptance is key. But I also then we've got to look at all the hype and the marketing around perimenopause and menopause. It's a huge global market out there right now. So again, we're putting profit before people. Do many of these things work? No, they don't. So I think it's just a case of acceptance, looking at the 7 elements that I've already spoken about, and ensuring that you're optimizing each of those areas. And if you are, then there's really, you're doing really well if you achieve that. And that is what will give you long-term, like longevity. That's what will give you a good quality of life. So, I really call on people to sit down, think about and visualize, close their eyes and play out the future that they would like. Who are they with? How do they look? Where are they? Are they on holiday? Are they at home? Have they retired? Are they with children, grandchildren? Are they smiling? They're happy. And then identify that the reason why you're taking care of your eating habits naturally, your sleep hygiene, your physical movement, your internal environment, your community of gut microbiota is because you want to live the future you have just envisaged for yourself. And really, that doesn't include using weight loss injections for a short period of time, then you're going to put the weight back on again and then go back to using them again. And then you'll have this vicious cycle that actually a lot of women were trying to escape when they were dieting throughout the pre-perimenopause years, if you like. And we're talking about Slimming World, Weight Watchers. And I did hear some data quite a few years ago when I was listening to Woman's Hour on Radio 4, talking about that for every pound we lose, we actually spend 100 UK pounds to lose that pound, because we end up going back to Weight Watchers. So again, there's that lack of education around what we should be eating, how much we should be eating, and when we should be eating. And that becomes even more important as we transition through perimenopause and menopause, because when we lose a certain level of our hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, then we become more at risk of developing cardiovascular issues, Alzheimer's, for example, and cancer as well. So, using these weight loss drugs can absolutely impact on endocrine and sex hormones, and therefore increase symptoms that somebody might be experiencing.
Yeah, brilliant. I really hope you've taken something from how Helen's explained that there, because it's such important information to understand. So to wrap us up, I'd love to give the woman listening 3 simple steps that she can think about taking to help improve this area of her life. So for us today, we're focusing on how to have those healthy habits, especially around food. And if you are someone who does want to lose weight, what would be 3 simple steps you would suggest? And I think you've given lots of great tips. I love the visioning one. So yeah, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I always, no matter who my clients are, male, female, teenagers, is eat that rainbow. Eat that rainbow at every meal, because then you don't have to think too much and become overwhelmed about vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, and so on and so forth. So just eat that rainbow. What does that mean? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And especially women going through perimenopause and our postmenopause, we need to increase our protein intake. So let's look at scrambled egg. Really think about how you can turn that scrambled egg, your breakfast, into a rainbow. So you can add tomatoes, you can add mushrooms, because white and brown is also a colour. You can add herbs, for example, whether you like coriander, flat leaf parsley, a bit of basil. You can add vegetables that are left over from your roast the day before. So throw in some leftover sweet potato, throw in some red peppers or a bit of cucumber. You might have some leftover salads. So really do think about how you can create a rainbow based on the meals that you normally have, whether it's bolognese, chili, and so on. Now, my next tip would be when to eat. So look at time restricted eating. So really, you don't want to be eating too late into the evening, because the more that you do that, then the more that can impact on your melatonin levels. Because when we wake up first thing in the morning, we want our cortisol levels to be rising so that we've got energy and we can go about our day. But as the day goes on, the cortisol levels drop off and our melatonin levels rise. And that's a neurotransmitter, a brain chemical that really helps us to sleep. So we don't want anything to interfere with that, because our sleep hygiene is really important when we are trying to achieve optimum health. So no late night eating, and if you can fast for about 12 to 14 hours, i.e., finish at 6 p.m, but don't have any breakfast until a.m. or a.m. But again, listen to your body. And if you have thyroid issues, for example, then perhaps fasting is not for you. So again, it comes down to this personalized nutrition and medicine, and also portion size. That's my third clinical pearl that I will share with you. Portion control absolutely matters. And for years now, and again, things that I share with my clients, we don't have sins, we don't have traffic lights. And what I do for me and my husband he's an ex-army triathlete as well, so his eating habits were different then compared to what they are now, is that I would have a plate. I still have a plate for breakfast, lunch, dinner, even if it's a bowl of soup, and I put it on the weighing scales. And I will then put a certain amount of protein on there first, then the vegetables or the salad, and then I leave the carbs until last. And you may find, for example, if you had a ham salad with jacket potato, that jacket potato, depending on how big it is, you would only be putting a quarter of it on the plate. So that's my 3 tips basically, is eat the rainbow with protein, time restricted eating, and portion control really does matter. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. They're really good tips, and ones that I think can really help people to reflect on the way they're eating right now in terms of what they eat, but when they eat, as you said, is such a big part of it. And I've certainly worked with women who raise an eyebrow when you talk with them around their current habits, and having that, I do guide people also to have a minimum of 12 hours without eating. And that's the raised eyebrow I get, because they're like, well, so can I not have the wine and the crisps on a night at 9 or 10 p.m. in front of the TV and so on? And I think so many people don't realise the downstream impact of making those kinds of choices. So yeah, there are some simple things like what Helen is suggesting that you can consider building as habits to help you feel better. And all of these things will help with hormonal balance as you do navigate the whole menopause journey as well, which I think is the priority for us, because those changing hormones, as we've touched on, have so much of an impact in our longer term health in a much bigger way. So those small choices might seem too small maybe, but actually they do have a really big part to play in the way you're going to live and how long you're going to live with strong health, which we all want. And the visioning you shared is a really great tool. I use that kind of thing myself as well. So it's been great diving into this topic. I know we could have talked about it in more detail and in lots of different ways, touched on different elements of it, but I think we've done it justice to help women really consider whether this is something that actually is going to work for them, to think about the bigger picture. So if people want to find out where to connect with you, where's the best place for them to reach out, Helen?
So there's three places really. So helenperks.com, that will tell people more about me and what I do. And then I also help organisations as well. So that would be thrivewellhealth.co.uk. And they can find me on LinkedIn as Helen Perks. So, and I'd love to say hello. And of course, if they want to come over to my Facebook page, then please do, at Helen Perks.
Brilliant. And I'll pop those links into the show notes as well to make it easy for you to go and connect with Helen, find out more about what she does, and reach out, let her know what you've enjoyed from our conversation. It's always good to hear from someone who has been inspired and taken some action on the back of listening to the episode. So thank you so much for your time and all of your knowledge. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.